There we go. And I go pin myself real quick. Okay. Well, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here. Um, Let me share my PowerPoint here and then we'll get started. Okay. Today's presentation is called Create an Invitation to Learn, Promoting Understanding and Engagement. And in this presentation, I will be sharing ways we can make sure our students are understanding what they're learning and that they're engaged in the learning process. I'll be sharing some common music standards that are typically found in the school system, but are also important things to think about even in private lessons. And I'll go through being able to recognize when students are engaged or they're not, and then the different learning styles that students have. And at the end, I will share 25 different things that you can check for understanding and engagement. It's going to be chock full of things. So I wanted to start out with this video.
Lola? Yeah. Okay, one day we went to the zoo. You just got to say went to the zoo.
We went to the zoo.
No, you don't say we went, just say to the zoo.
To the zoo.
One day we went to the zoo.
We went to the zoo.
No, you don't say we went, you just say to the zoo.
To the zoo.
Perfect. Okay, one day we went to the zoo.
We went to the zoo.
No, you don't say we went, darling. Okay, start again. Just say to the zoo.
To the zoo.
One day we went to the zoo.
We went to the zoo.
No, you said we went, love. You just...
I meant. Okay.
Okay, gonna do it right this time? No, you don't say we went, you just say to the zoo. Okay, we've got to keep Rocco entertained, okay? This is his song. One day we went to the zoo. No, you don't say we.
We went to the zoo.
No, but you just say to the zoo.
Okay.
Say.
To the zoo. To the zoo. To the zoo. To the zoo.
Okay, ready? One day we went to the zoo.
We went to the zoo.
No, you said we went, love.
I mean, we went to the zoo.
I know, you just did it wrong again. Ready? Last time. One day we went to the zoo.
We went to the zoo.
No!
All right, every time I watch that video, it just cracks me up. This is a great example of tell me and I forget, show me and I remember, involve me and I understand. So does this sound familiar? I'm going to give you a few scenarios. After taking 3.5 years of lessons, John comes up upon a fermata in his music. You quickly remind him to watch for the fermata and he exclaims, I never learned that before, when you know for a fact you have taught the concept over a dozen times. Or maybe after teaching Sarah for 2 years, she still cannot play or name bass D correctly. Or maybe in group lessons, a question in a game comes up. How many sharps and flats does the key of C have? Only to be shocked and dismayed to see students scrambling to figure out the answer. All right, look, does this look familiar? With some of our students, we're like, I know I taught you this. Well, when students don't think something is relevant to what they're learning, they won't remember it. And if they're not engaged in what they're learning, they will not remember it. So I wanted to first go through Bloom's taxonomy, and this has been around for many, many years. And what Bloom's taxonomy is, if you haven't heard it before, and I think, I think I need to let people in, right? Or Jill, do you have the ability to do that? Participants. Okay.
I'm sorry.
Do you have the ability to let people in, or do I need to do that?
I think you must have it. I think, do you
Okay.
have the hosting? Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so how do I do this? Why is this not? Okay, I heard the ding dong, but I don't see.
Yeah. Maybe
I think it was Karen Ziegler and she's in now. I think that
Okay.
was the ding dong.
Okay. Okay,
Hi.
awesome. Okay. Okay. Maybe I think they just automatically come in, right? I don't have to like approve. Okay.
Yeah, I think
Okay,
they're coming
perfect.
in.
Okay. So on Bloom's taxonomy, it refers to a classification of 6 different learning objectives that educators set for their students. And it divides into different objective, what they call domains, which is the cognitive, affective, and psychomotor. So they have this pyramid, and at the bottom of the pyramid, we have remembering. And this is asking yourself, can the student recall or remember the information? And then understanding is, can the student explain ideas or concepts? I almost feel like the understanding should be the first, because if they understand, they're going to remember better. But we'll go on. So applying, can the student use the information in a new way? So can they apply what they're learning and what you've taught them? And then analyzing, can the student distinguish between the different parts? For example, can they see patterns and such? Analyze their music. And evaluating, can the student justify a standard decision? So this would be perfect for interpretation of their music. Can they justify why they would do something the way they did? And then creating, can the student create something new or give a different point of view? So this is more of a skill set, such as composition. So the Bloom's taxonomy is really a nice pyramid just to kind of ask yourself these questions with your students and see if they are understanding what they're learning. And I also think, just as importantly, it's good to be familiar with the National Common Core Music Standards. And these standards, the first one is creating. And the creating is planning and making and developing ideas. They might present or share, create something and then share it with others. They might be imagining musical ideas and generating those ideas. That would be more with the creating. And then performing, that's selecting the repertoire, of course, learning it, analyzing it, refining it, and then, of course, performing, presenting it. And then responding is selecting and choosing appropriate music for your student. And again, the analyzing could come into this, as well as the interpretation and just the supporting of the interpretations of the musical works that they're learning and evaluating that. And then the last one is connecting. So how do our students make a meaningful connection with the music that they're learning or the experiences that they're having? And this is, some ideas are connecting with their personal interests, or certain pieces that they might gravitate towards, certain genres or ideas, or composition or jazz or improvisation, things like that. And then allowing that to help with creating, performing, and responding. I love this quote. It's by Chickering and Gampson. And this is from the 7 Principles for Good Practice in Undergraduate Education. And they say, learning is not a spectator sport. Students do not learn much just by sitting in classes listening to teachers, memorizing prepackaged assignments, and spitting out answers. They must talk about what they are learning, write about it, relate it to the past experiences, and apply it to their daily lives. They must make what they learn part of themselves. So this goes into what is engaged learning. So engaged learning is the process in which students actively participate in their learning. So that actively is a good word to remember. The teacher serves as a coach or facilitator, guiding students to the desired goal. So isn't that what our ultimate goal in teaching music is to teach in a way where we're more of a facilitator, guiding our students in that music making process so they can have ownership with their learning as well. So according to Plugging In, engaged learners are responsible for their own learning, and they're energized by their learning. They're strategic and they're collaborative. And we have a lot of ways where we can have that collaborative experience and engage our students. So students are engaged when they're conducting authentic and multidisciplinary tasks. They're participating in interactive learning. They're working collaboratively. So anytime you have those experiences that you can do in that way is great. And then they learn through exploration. So give them a lot of chances for interpretation and improvisation and such. So here's another great quote by Pat Wolf. She says, no matter how well planned, how interesting, stimulating, colorful, or relevant the lesson, if the teacher does all of the interacting with the material, the teacher's, not the student's brain will grow. It isn't that so true? Like, if you think about it, we're planning for our students. We might do lesson plans and stuff, and we do all this planning and stuff, and we learn a lot. I know when I'm planning for camps, for example, I learn so much when I'm going through that planning process with what I'm doing. But I want to make sure that it's not just I'm not doing just the learning, that my students, that I can convey and engage them in the way that their brain will grow too, and learn what I want them to learn. Okay, so how do we know if they are engaged in their learning? So these are the next little slides that I'm going to be going through come from a link that I have at the top, and I also posted this in my handout. Any links and stuff that I referred to are in the handout. So the first is visions of learning. So these are things like responsible learning, for example, setting goals. I like to do SMART goals with my students, and SMART is an acronym. And I link to a blog post that I have that explains what that acronym is and how you can use it with your students. So that's really helpful. And actually, you know what? I don't know. Did I link that? I'm going to link this in the chat too, just to be safe. Because I don't know for sure if I linked this particular one. So let me copy and paste this one so you have it. All right. Okay, so just really quick on the acronym. So the SMART acronym is specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and timely. And they break out their goals in, what's the specific of the goal and how do I measure if I accomplished it or not, or what I'm going to be doing with it. Is it attainable? Am I setting myself up for success or failure? That kind of thing. And then relevant. Is this relevant for what I'm trying to achieve? And then, of course, timely. Is there a deadline to this? All right. Let me just get this out of the way. Okay. And then the next one is strategic. This develops thinking and learning strategies. So this is when they transfer their knowledge to solve problems. This is especially helpful when they're at home practicing and you're not with them, that they know the practice steps that they can take to solve any problems that they have at home. And then energized by learning. They're not dependent on rewards. It's funny, I have an example of this. Years and years ago, I used to do a treasure box in my studio. And then one year I decided not to do it, but I didn't tell my students at all. And I just wanted to see if anybody would mention it. I only had one student out of all of my students even mention it at all. And I was actually really surprised. And I'm like, okay, well, we're not going to do the treasure box anymore. I mean, they don't seem motivated by that particular thing, and I saved money by not doing it anymore either. So there we go. So they're energized by learning. They're passionate. That this is the intrinsic motivation. And then collaborative is developing new ideas and understanding in conversations. So working with others. Of course, we have ensemble experiences that we could do, which are fun. I don't know, does the Boulder chapter do something like that at all?
Yeah, we do. We have a multiple piano festival where the students play together in that format. Um, and they do achievement days, so some of them will collaborate for that, but mainly it's the multiple piano festival.
Okay. Yeah, awesome. Yeah. All right. Okay, so the next one is tasks of learning. So the authentic is it's addressed to personal interest. Um, you know, pertains to the real world. You know, pop songs might be part of the authentic category, and in that way, as far as the real world goes, you know, it's relevant to what they're doing, listening to, and such. And then challenging is it's difficult enough to be interesting, but not frustrating. And I like to, when I give my students a little more challenging piece, I remind them that this, and they feel like they're struggling a little bit, but I know that they can do it. I remind them that this is a stretch goal. It's a stretching moment for them that will allow them to grow. And, you know, and then I help them in that task of learning where they can complete that challenge. And then multidisciplinary is solving problems and issues by, you know, by the piece or by whatever it is, the little things that are going on and what you're working on. All right, and then assessment, of course, is performance based, or can be performance based. Performing in a real for a real audience, you know, it has that purpose of sharing. So this could be recitals, it could be events, adjudications, it could be piano parties, it could be group classes. There's all sorts of things that can fall under the performance based. And then you can assess through generative, which means it has a meaning for the learner. It matches their goals, so it's all focused on making it more meaningful for them. And then seamless and ongoing is part of the instruction. So sometimes you might assess during a game that they're playing. Just kind of, you know, they don't realize they're being assessed, but you can assess that way. And equitable. This is parents and students should be familiar with your standards, and then they should be, the assessment should be based on the individual student. Next one is instructional model. Instructional can be interactive. So the teacher or the technology that you might be using is responsive to their learning needs and it actively engages them. And then generative in the instruction model would mean that you're having meaningful activities and experiences that allow them to reflect and then and build up on their repertoire, build on what they're learning, you know, step by step type things. And then learning content, collaborative is part of the learning community. So think group lessons and camps and ensembles. Knowledge building, this is learning experiences that are set up to share for everyone to understand. So if you're in a group situation that you're able to help those that might be struggling a little bit with a concept, as well as the ones that need a little bit more challenge, where it's for everyone. And then empathetic is an environment that's set up for valuing individual strengths. So think of different, you know, learning situations where students might have different prior knowledge. This is really important with transfer students, to be empathetic in what they know, what they're coming to you with, and things. All right, and then teacher role. I talked a little bit about this. We mentioned facilitator, and a facilitator basically engages the students and monitors and with the discussions and the work and what's going on there. Guide is just like it sounds, modeling, explaining when needed, refocusing. Sometimes our students get off task and we just kind of guide them back in. providing different options. And then the co-learner is willing to learn from each other. And a great way to also do this, and I think this is one of my 25 ways, but is to switch roles for student to be the teacher and the teacher be the student. Okay, and now I want to go into the coaching cycle to kind of get the more of a mindset of what a coach would be like, or a guide or facilitator. So in this cycle, the first thing is to assess, which is determine the need of our students. And then we need to set goals. I'm a huge goal teacher, so every year I have my students set goals. And then it's not, and then I'll go into the next thing. So we set goals, and then we want to make sure those goals are manageable, that they'll get results. We don't want to set goals that will just be forgotten, or they're just too much that it's just overwhelming, and then they say, forget it, I'm not going to do it. And then prepare, this is planning and sharing your resources, your lesson plans, etc. Implement is modeling, observing, co-teaching. And then the last is so important, and it gets forgotten quite a lot, but reflect. So this is reflecting on the needs of our students, the goals that we set together. It's important not to just set goals for our students, but for this to be a collaborative experience of setting goals. They need to be involved in the goal process. Even if they're 5 years old, I have my students, we work together with their goals. And then reflecting, because reflecting will allow you to decide how effective that cycle was, or if you need to adapt and change things up, or what you should do next. So if we miss this step, it's kind of, all the other stuff was kind of just floating, and it's not really a cycle. Okay, our next one is student roles. So they play an important part in their learning, right? So the first one is the explorer. So this is a student who explores new ideas and researches. Opportunities for research is great, and then apply the skills that they learned. A cognitive apprentice is engaging in real research, and they're developing skills with a mentor that stimulates the role of as if they were a little professional. So you have, if you can partner up students with a mentor, and they that would be a perfect cognitive apprentice experience. And then teacher, of course, is us. We encourage and teach and guide and facilitate and all that fun stuff. And then the producer of knowledge is develop ideas and tools of real use. So they're using their knowledge and applying it. So that's all the indicators of engaged learning. There's quite a bit going on there, but they're really interesting, I think, to think about. All right, now I think it's also important to identify learning styles. So we have auditory learners who learn by talking or listening. Sometimes our talkers, sometimes we're like, oh, you need to stop talking, but sometimes that's how they process. That's their learning style. So kind of, now if they're talking about something that's totally not related at all, then that's another issue. But so they learn by talking, and they also learn by listening. And then visual is learning by seeing video or image. I'm a strong visual learner. A lot of us are. And then we have the kinesthetic tactile learners who learn by doing. So I'm going to give you show you a picture, and I want you to think of what kind of learner you think this student is. You're welcome to type it in the chat or say it out loud. So I asked permission for Sarah if I could share this. She said, how to tell your student loves her book. She made tabs for every single song, made my day. So do you think this student is an auditory, visual, or kinesthetic tactile learner? Any guesses? Jill said visual. You could type in the chat if you want. We have a couple visuals. Okay, so I'll go ahead and tell you what I think. So visual is a really good guess. I think they are a strong visual, but I think even stronger is that they're a tactile learner. And that's because these tabs are tactile. It's things you can touch. They can actually touch them and go to the pages. It's very, very, it just screams tactile to me because of all the things that are going on in that book. And then I would say visual would be the high second. And you actually, in the handout, I have a link to a free assessment online where you can, I think I went too much, but you can check your learning style, and you could probably even have your students do the assessment, although there are some questions that wouldn't apply to them. But you can check your learning style, and mine was, actually, let me share this quote and then I'll share what mine was. So this quote is, learning styles mirror sensory preferences. Knowing about learning styles and sensory preferences is particularly important for music teachers. They need to help students incorporate all three senses into the learning process from the beginning. So this was mine when I did my results. So I was 45% visual, 30% auditory, and then 25% tactile. And the visual did not surprise me because I knew I was quite a visual learner, and then I was really close on the second two. But you'll find that when you do your assessment, there might be some that are super duper close. You could have like a visual and a tactile, like 45% one and 45% the other, and then 10% on the next. So you can have a couple that are really strong. This is important to know what your learning style is, because you'll find that whatever your learning style is, that's usually what your teaching style is. So if you're a strong visual learner, typically your teaching style is very visual as well. So it's good to recognize that, because not all students are going to be the same. So you need to make sure you have the three different learning styles going on in your teaching. So, okay. Valerie Lloyd Watts, by the way, I linked to, she did I don't know if it's 16, 17 page report called The Music Learning Cycle, and it was really great read. And so this goes through that, and she says there's 4 things to the music learning cycle. The ear listens to the piece to be learned. So this is the thing that creates the motivation. Usually the students say, oh, I heard this song on the radio, I really want to learn it. Or, oh, I just saw on Canto and I really want to learn, the, Bruno song or whatever it is. That's the ear got him in first, and that's creating the motivation. I want to play this piece. And then the eye is reading the music. That's creating the confidence that I think I could do this. I have the music, I can, it looks like it's something I can probably do. And then the hand is playing the piece. So this provides competence. I did it. I learned the piece. And then the last one is the mind. And this is understanding and integrating what's been learned. So this is the gratification. I feel good about my accomplishment. I totally polished this piece. I'm really excited to share it now. And then the cycle starts all over. And then we have the student parent teacher triangle, which most of you are probably familiar with. So I'll just go through this quickly. So the parents play a significant role in creating the conditions that support and encourage learning. Parents spend the most time with their children, right? And they strongly influence their child's emotional states and attitudes when it comes to practicing. So if you have a parent who's not very supportive of practicing, the child practicing at home, maybe the piano's in the same room as the TV and the parent wants to watch TV, that's going to be a little bit of an issue, or could be a little bit of an issue. And it can also be an issue with the any attitudes that might be happening with the child. Maybe they don't feel supported, or and that kind of thing. So it's important for parents to know how their role is so important. And then students thrive in a safe learning environment where they can grow without being judged or compared to others. That's what we want for our students. And then teachers share a common goal with parents. They want their children to love learning, love the instrument that they're playing. And they want them to be self-motivated and practice gladly. Children by nature love to learn, and so it's just a matter of making sure that they do. They love to learn, and they want to please themselves and their parents and their teachers, and just making it a positive experience overall. So from the music learning cycle, Valerie Lloyd Watts said, all people learn best when they're engaged in an activity they love. So first, we're going to go through understanding emotions. I'm getting ahead of myself, sorry. Okay, so Valerie shared that, and I don't have this quote, so I'll just read it, but it's not on the screen. She says, a person's emotional state, whether positive or negative, influences the ability to learn. Because emotions are not visible nor always obvious, they are frequently ignored or underestimated as important factors in learning. What does a child who resists practicing the piano or doing homework willingly spend hours at a computer? Or why? What is the real problem? It's not the student's ability to learn or concentrate on a given task. The problem is an emotional one. The essential challenge for parents and teachers is therefore how to prevent or remove the emotional blocks that interfere with learning. And I love to go along with that. I love this quote from a school principal. She says, the way teachers teach has more to do with how they feel than what they know. And boy, isn't that, if you think about that, when we're just not feeling it, it's hard. And so it's important. I'm going to go to the next one. The next one is influence motivation. So when we're not feeling, maybe we're just having a rough personal day, but we still have 10 students to teach. What do we do? So influence motivation. This is the quickest way to influence motivation is by the way we communicate our energy. So our body language and voices speak far more convincingly more than the words that we're using. We might be using these positive words, but if we're tired or we're not feeling well, we're most likely going to be moving slowly. We might be talking quietly. So our body language is definitely showing we're maybe not feeling too great or just not there. And then our voice reflection also shows it. But when we're excited, we move with energy and enthusiasm. And so it's important to keep that in mind when our students walk in the door. Do we have the right body language and the voice inflection as far as that goes? So I have a little short activity I want to do, and so I won't have you stand or anything. We'll just sit. But I want you to sit tall and throw your shoulders back, and then put a smile on your face and shout loudly and quickly, loud and quick, just real excited. I'm so depressed. Good. All right, now I want you to put your head kind of down and slumped and say slowly and softly, I'm so excited. So how does that feel? It kind of felt silly, right? It felt weird. It didn't match what we were saying. So this is huge. Anthony Robbins says, body language is the lever to emotion, and emotion drives behavior. And so Since the body influences the mind, it's possible to change the emotional state by changing our body language. So as long as we're aware of our body language, then it triggers to our mind, okay, wait a minute, I am excited, or I do want the student to be here. I'm excited for them to walk in the door, that kind of thing. So change your body language, or be aware of your body language, and then it will go into your mind and it help. I have a student example of this, and you might have had a similar experience. One of my students years ago came in, and his body language was just, it was that slump, and it was just, not great. And he would come week after week, and I knew he enjoyed his lessons, but I'm like, what is going on? So finally I asked his mom, I'm noticing Strider just, does not seem happy right now. Like, what, is there something going on at home that I should be aware of? And because lessons were like, he was getting me down, it was just dragging. And so she's like, yeah, his dad's in the military, and he had just gone off to serve, and so he wasn't going to be home for a long time while he was serving, and so he's really close to his dad, and so that was just really hard for him, and so he was struggling. And so that was really helpful for me to know and be aware of. And I don't think parents often think to mention some of these things to teachers, but they're very helpful when we're aware of things like this, of what might be going on in the home. There's some things that are too private to share, but it is helpful if there's a struggle. And so that's one thing I'm definitely, when I see a change in a student in their body language, I try to ask if there's anything I can do or help them when they're at lessons in that way. Okay. So builds confidence. Confidence is the inner state that permits students to feel capable and believe in themselves. And students experience confidence when they're with people who believe in them and who make them feel capable and who are encouraging them. And so if I were to choose one word that kind of encompasses all of this, that would be affirm. And then the next is promote competence. Once students have some level of confidence that learning is possible, even if it's a little challenging, the evidence of progress, which is the competence, must follow. So this is promoted by sharing, setting and accomplishing reasonable goals and achieve them. So this also might be something like breaking a piece down into small enough steps where the student has 99.9% chance of success on the first try. So sometimes that's just one measure. You have to just keep going smaller and smaller if you need to, but it helps, and then gradually move out again. But we want to make sure they feel that they're capable. And to help with this, we could focus on one task at a time, make goals specific, and then of course give feedback appropriately and honestly, but positive. We still want to be honest and be appropriate, but we want to be encouraging as well. All right, reinforce gratification. So this is the feeling of satisfaction that comes from working at an activity that requires skill and effort. So this is different from pleasure. Sometimes we confuse the two words, pleasure and gratification. Pleasures are immediate. Gratification takes longer. So that's what leads to the growth. That's what builds character, and that's what builds the self-esteem that we want students to have when they're learning music. And then to help with this, we treat students with respect. We ask questions or make requests instead of demands. And we cultivate independence by encouraging responsibility. Okay, and then last on this, and then we'll get into some ways for checking understanding and engagement. So make learning active. 75% of us, when I read this, are talk processors. And I thought that was interesting. So it says thus most individuals learn by talking. And I thought, oh wow, that's high. But if you think about it for a minute, this is probably why sometimes we feel better after venting. I know when I can get my thoughts out verbally, I'm able to come up with solutions that I hadn't thought about otherwise. So if the listener, so many times that's my husband, might not be able to give me advice, and I'm not necessarily looking for advice, I just need him to listen. All of a sudden, boom, that light bulb moment will go off just because I was able to talk it out. So I think that's important to think about with our students is sometimes when they're struggling, let them talk it out and see, what might be going on. And sometimes that light bulb moment might go off because of that. Okay, so now we're going to go 25 ways to check for understanding and engagement. So the first is, and I mentioned this earlier, student, you're flipping roles. So student be the teacher, and they teach the student. And this is a great way to check for understanding because they're telling you what to do. They're looking at the music and making sure you're doing it correctly and that kind of thing. So you can definitely check for understanding there. And they're engaged. They love this. And then the next is group and teamwork. Anytime you can get groups and teams together to do teamwork type activities, this is a great way to engage and then check for understanding as well. Games, of course, this is your active learning. Technology, apps, digital games, videos, let's see, what else? PowerPoints, YouTube, TED Talks, anything like that, any kind of technology are ways that you can check for understanding and engagement. Technology, I have a smartboard example here. Smartboards you see mostly in the schools, but years ago I was able to purchase a smartboard that I didn't have to have like a really expensive, because smartboards are not cheap, a really fancy smartboard that you see at the schools. I was able to get this one that I was able to use with just having my PowerPoint projector. I don't even know if they sell it anymore, but it was really cool. So I'll give you an example of this. So they just clicked on the answer. This isn't group lessons, so they're all looking and trying to decide while she's doing the answers. And it just is a little more engaging way to name their notes. And whoops. Okay. Okay. Oops, I'm going the wrong way. There we go. Okay. Flipped classroom or studio is great. What a flipped learning is that the main learning happens before they see you or in a different time. For example, I have a music lab, and so sometimes I'll have them do, I like to use the piano program the theory program by Kathy Rabago, and she has videos all for students to watch on their theory. And so they'll watch the video and then they'll do their worksheets. And so that would be a good example of a flipped learning experience. And then when they come to me, I can see on their worksheet, did they get it? And if they didn't, then I can dive deeper into what they're not understanding. So it's a little bit of a time saver as well. And let's see. This is blend space. I wanted to just show you a little, actually I probably will skip this one. Blend space is another, well, let's see. I'll have to stop my share and do a different share real quick because is it still on the PowerPoint?
Yes, it is.
Okay, so yeah, I'll have to stop my share. I'll stop my share and then I'll share. What blend space is. It's free, and it's a way for you this is a great tool for like a flipped learning. It's a way for you to lay out a lesson that can have different things to the lesson. So for example, when I was doing a lesson on conducting, I had a cute little video that they could watch here, and then a question, and they could, there's a little discussion on the side where they can ask or put little comments in there. Here's another conducting video, and then I have a little chart on how to conduct in 2/4, 3/4, and 4/4. And then another video, and I'm gonna skip over to, oh, I'm not signed up. Anyway, you could do quizzes. So everything is like boom, 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 boom. You have it laid out where it's one thing right after the other. So you don't have to worry. It's just a nice flow for students to navigate, which is really nice. Okay, I'll go back to... Okay. Anyway, so that's called blend space. That should be on your handout too, just in case you're interested in looking at that. Okay, entrance or exit question. So here's a little picture example of that one. Sometimes I like to put this little mystery rhythm on here where when students walk up to the door, they knock with the rhythm. And that is just gets them engaged right before they enter the door. So immediately they're like, oh, what's this? What's going on? And so they're, walking in the door with excitement and, because something's new. And then, so this could be anything. You can have them enter with something, or you can have them leave with something. So maybe when you're leaving, you can ask them to write an answer on the whiteboard. So you wrote down a question on a whiteboard, and before they leave, they have to write their answer or something like that. So that's what an entrance or exit question would be. The next one is debrief. So at the last 3 to 5 minutes of the lesson, have them reflect on what they learned. So they can explain to you what they learned if you want, or what they're supposed to practice that week. Did they have any questions? Just making sure that they're leaving with an understanding. And then assessments, we talked about this quite a bit previously, but assessment tools would be things like quizzes, adjudications. Kahoot is a fun online assessment tool. Quizlet is one that you can do quizzes with, things like that. Rate, what this means is if you have a student that is not a very, not really a talker, because we have those students. On a scale, you could ask them, on a scale of 1 through 10, how much do you think you understand? And they can usually tell you, and they're usually pretty honest on what they would rate themselves. So then you can go from there and ask them more questions. Journal thoughts. This is similar to debriefing, but journaling their reflections. I mentioned I have a music lab. One of the things I like to do, because the music lab activities are independent, I'm not in there with them. And so I want to make sure they're understanding what they're learning and doing in there. So sometimes I'll have them do a little reflection card where they're writing down what they learned. And so then I could see that they did learn and understand. Okay, evaluate. An example of this would be watching a YouTube video and have a student evaluate the performance, or ask specific questions about the performance, talk about it and evaluate and see what they thought and such. And then hear, see, play, and label. So for example, hear a half note, see a half note, play a half note, and this is a half note. That would be an example of that. Mind maps are representing a concept, and then here's an example of a mind map. So if I'm learning C major, and I know C major has no sharps, it has no flats, the notes are C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, and they're all white keys. So they're mapping out their knowledge. They could be really fun. You could get really creative with that. They can add some visuals to a mind map as well. All right, fill in the blank questions. That's pretty self-explanatory. All right, hands-on manipulatives. There's so many hands-on manipulatives that we can do with students. This puppets are really popular right now. On the handout, I link to a blog post that gives you 7 ideas on how to use a puppet, and they're really fun. Students love them. They're everywhere. If you go to the mall, there you see them. There's always a booth that has puppets. And then Hoberman sphere is another example. I really like to use this for teaching crescendo and diminuendo. I'm going to stop my share for just a second because I don't know if you can see me. So like it's more of a visual experience with the crescendo and diminuendo. And then it also articulation. I can do more like this with articulation, or a phrase. You can also go over a phrase, as it goes bigger and then dies down. You could do different visuals with this. You could get this on Amazon, but it comes in handy with different things like that. So I love different hands-on manipulatives. They're engaging for sure. Okay, let's see. Another example of a hands-on manipulative. I really like this. I asked for permission to share this as well. Rosemary said, the little guy was not impressed with learning intervals until I pulled out the whiteboard parking lot. Great fun. And I love that because when she was first doing the intervals, he was bored. It wasn't relevant at all. He wasn't not engaged, but as soon as she created this little parking lot with these little cars, all of a sudden it became relevant to him, and he was definitely engaged. And you can bet that he learned those intervals. And he will most likely remember that too and want to do it again. All right, 3, 2, 1. This is a way to check for learning and understanding. So this is having a student say like what are 3 things that you learned today? Tell me 2 interesting things that you might have learned, and 1 question. Do you have 1 question for me? Or you could, it doesn't have to be in that order as far as what I just said, or you can do whatever you want for 3, 2, 1. And then description, this is writing words to describe a concept. And projects, of course, are fun to do. I love to do different composition projects. The great thing about composition projects is it helps students to understand where note placement is, the stem placement, and where notes should belong on the staff. Of course, values, time signatures, and making sure the measures are just right. There's a lot of theory that's going on with composition, so they're a great tool to check for understanding and on that, and they're just engaging projects as well. Here's a summer project that one of my students did for her practice project, summer project, and I loved because I had my students come up with their own summer practice project. So her and her mom came up with this one, and she loves to dress up, and so to keep her on task in her summer practicing, she would ultimately earn a princess costume. And so each week was something new. She would earn her crown one week or her wand another week, and getting ultimately to the complete princess costume. I love that idea because you could really do anything. Okay, interview is doing an interview project is also a great way to check for understanding. So if say like you are learning about a composer, you can pretend you are interviewing a composer, or maybe a relative that might have some music history background or something that they can interview, things like that. Those are great ways to engage students in learning a little bit more. Comic book or story. I love doing these kind of projects as well to my students. I love combining them with composition projects too. But this is creating a story to representing, their understanding, what they're learning. Coming up with a story. And then TED Talk, studio classroom style. Have students give a give a subject, that they can talk about. Poster or drawing, they can draw out what you want them to do. Like I mean, it could be anything, really anything. Act or dramatic interpretation. So here's an example. Sue Shiner, we have a program called Keyboard Gymnastics here in Phoenix area, and this was a creative project that her students did, where they did a little puppet show with I think it's Bach and Beethoven, it looks like. And so you can bet, the students totally, this was their project. The teacher was not doing anything for this. So the students had to do their due diligence and finding out more about these composers and then creating the puppet show and everything. And then you could bet after it was all said and done that they'll remember the facts that they learned in their research, putting this all together. All right, write a poem or song that represents understanding. And the last one is really good. I have a student that has selective mutism. And so what I found interesting about teaching her is she will talk if we're playing games. That's when she'll talk more. But during the regular lesson, she tends to not talk. So signals are really good. So signals would be like, if you understand, you know, show me finger one, or no fingers, or thumbs down, thumbs up. That's usually what I do with her, is thumbs down, thumbs up. Right hand, left hand, you could have cards that they can hold specific things that you're trying to check for understanding. I have her point a lot, so different signals like that. So that completes the 25 ways. So I like to kind of leave a challenge at the end, because many times we attend these presentations and I gave you a lot of information there. There's a lot of ideas, and sometimes you get bombarded with that, and then we go back to our teaching, we go back to our regular routine, and we forget most of what we learned. So we want to make sure that we remember, we want to reflect and everything. So your challenge is choosing one new thing you learned in the session today and implement it. And then if you do, feel free to email me. The email is right there, but it's also in the handout. And then let me know what it was that you did. So, and then once you do, then I have a little surprise that I'll send you. So, and no deadline on that one, so you just have to remember. All right, well, thanks for having me. I hope that was helpful.
Thank you so much for being with us, Jennifer. We really appreciate that. Do you have time for questions or
Sure.
anything? Anyone
Yep.
have questions about the presentation or anything?
How long are your typical lessons?
So my students are here for an hour, but they're with me for a half hour, and then they do music lab for a half hour. But every once in a while, like this week, we're doing a game that I want the two of them to do together, and so I shorten that a little bit on either side, and then we do a game together. So it's a little adaptable.
Thank you.
And then I also do a lot of group experiences through the through the year. We have probably about every other month that we have some kind of group activity, and I also do camps during the year too. So
Your camp ideas are really great. I know you have a lot on your website, just different like camp packages, and like you can just look at and you kind of lay it all out how you could do a camp. And
yeah, it's fun.
yeah, that's really cool. All right, well, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you.
You're
Something-
welcome. Yeah, and if you think of any other questions, feel free. I know sometimes we don't think of it until later. Feel free to email me. So I check my email all the time.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me. All right.
So